It was the best of rundowns. It was the worst of rundowns. It was the rundown of learning. It was the rundown of ignorance. It was the epic of checkpoints. It was the epic of bugs. It was the season of glow sticks. It was the season of long-range flashlights. It was the spring of cosmetics. It was the winter of palette RNG. We had the extraction before us. We had the swarm of enemies behind us. We were all going deeper in the complex. We were all returning back to the lobby. In short, it's time for me to give my review of Rundown 6. Hello everyone, Professor Scalar here to rant about how much I absolutely hate Rundown 6 and how bad I think the devs did with this one. I'm sorry, I can't say that with a straight face. I can't lie like that. I'm just joking. I do like Rundown 6 quite a bit for what it is, and there are many reasons behind that. But before we get into what I liked and disliked about Rundown 6 and specifics, and as well as a few other things, I want to give the usual spiel that I do in all of these review videos. This video is comprised of my thoughts and opinions. Keyword, opinions. It's perfectly fine to disagree with what I or others say in regards to GTFO. Heck, that's true about pretty much anything in life. But just because you disagree, that doesn't give you a free pass to be rude and inconsiderate to others. These review videos are one of my many ways to share my thoughts with both the community and the developers themselves, and I urge others to share their own thoughts down in the comments, that way the devs or other people can also see them. But I also urge you people to be polite and cordial in what you have to say. If there's something about the game you don't like, feel free to talk about it as long as you're not just lashing out at the devs. You know, if you say stuff like, the devs are awful at making their own game, they have no clue what they're doing, they're like, this is everything that's wrong, nobody's going to listen to that. The devs definitely aren't, and I myself am just going to think, yep, another angry person, I don't care what they have to say. Give constructive criticism and ideas so others see that you do have valid reasoning and you're not just lashing out in anger. If you see someone else discussing a topic that you have a differing viewpoint on, feel free to reply to them, start up a conversation. Just remember that you're having a conversation and not a presidential debate where you're just trying to tell the other person they're wrong and they're an idiot for it and they need to shut up. Because that's not going to get you anywhere. That's just going to cause a huge argument to break out. For the most part, all of you have been very civil in my previous review videos, and I'm really hoping to see that continue here because I'm starting to see some people in the community become more and more rowdy about their opinions, so I'm hoping that's not going to spread here. If it does, I might have to start clicking that delete button on a few comments, but hopefully it will not come to that. But now that I've put that out on the table and you're all aware of what I'm expecting from you in this, let's get into the review itself and start off with our very first topic. First on the list, I want to talk about something that many people have been discussing ever since Rundown 6 was released, and that would be the difficulty of this rundown. Or rather, I guess I should say the lack of difficulty, because this rundown is definitely one of the easier ones we've seen. Is it the easiest rundown that we've ever seen? No, I would disagree with that. Is it on the easier side of the spectrum? Yes. Was it a mistake? Was this a failure to a hardcore difficult game by having such an easy rundown? No, I don't think so whatsoever. This rundown wasn't like any other. This wasn't like Rundown 3 or 4 or 5 that was just simply a new update to the game. This was the 1.0 release. Early access tag, bye-bye, that's gone. This was fully released and it was going to bring a lot of newer players in, especially because they announced it at the Game Awards, which had millions upon millions of people watching it. And I know this is true because so many new players got into the game around the time of Rundown 6. Looking at the Steam charts, I saw that a lot of people were playing it again. Looking at the public GTFO Discord, I saw a lot of people filling up the channels incredibly quickly. Twitch, I saw so many new people streaming the game that had never streamed it before. Even when I was playing with somebody who was streaming the game, I heard them over and over again talking to their chat because new people who had never seen it were asking questions. What's this game about? Is it fun? Should I get it? And we kept on answering those questions over and over throughout the runs. There were so many people who had their eyes on GTFO, which was amazing to see. But that's not enough. It's not enough to just simply grab people's attention, you have to hold on to it as well. Keep them interested in the game. And when it comes to GTFO, the way to do that is by making it fun, interesting, and just interactable. It has to grab their attention and keep them in it. And a good way to not do that is by making the entryway for this game so brutal and difficult, or the learning curve so steep, that they feel like they can't even play past 1 or 2 levels before just being smacked in the face with a brick wall that they can't get past. And that's basically what Rundown 5 did. Rundown 5 is known as the most difficult rundown we've ever seen, and it was brutal. In R5A2, you saw a birther in pitch black darkness that automatically woke up with a bunch of baby strikers in the overload objective. Yes, that was overload, but that's still an A2 level. R5B1, in the main objective portion, you saw chargers, which is fine. I think you can show them there. But what I don't think you should have shown were giant chargers during an error alarm that forced you into a zone that had a ton of sleeping giant strikers and giant shooters and even more giant chargers potentially. That was a mistake. That made it so a lot of people could not even get past the first 2 levels of Rundown 5, and they struggled forever until either they actually got really good at the game, they got carried by people who were better than them, or they finally sat down, watched a few videos, and practiced and improved their skills. Which, yeah, watching videos and improving their skills isn't a bad thing, but it shouldn't be the go-to. You shouldn't have to tell newer players, oh yeah, the game is difficult, you're just gonna have to get good, watch some videos or just practice more. No, that's not good. That's gonna make a lot of people just unmotivated. They're not gonna want to because they feel like, oh, this is a hardcore game and the hardcore veteran tier players are giving me very poor advice. It's as if they don't care about me. It's as if the devs don't care about me because they're not trying to help out the newer players. And that's what a lot of people told me they felt like in Rundown 5. In Rundown 6, 10 Chambers wanted to remedy that. That's why we got so many new things that were just new mechanics of the game, but also helped out a bit. Story-based missions. Missions are more focused on telling a story rather than difficulty. Checkpoints that make the levels more accessible. Bots that make it so that if you don't have 4 close friends to play with, you can maybe just have 2 or 3 people in a group with a bot to fill in the last few slots. Weapons being buffed. They made that almost every single weapon that was in Rundown 5 that stayed to Rundown 6 was more powerful, either more damage, more precision damage, more ammunition in the reserves, a lot of stuff to make it so that people had a higher chance if they tend to go loud more often. More resources so that people did go loud more often or they got hit more often, they would still have the resources they needed to complete the levels. Enemy distribution. We didn't see enemies like chargers or shadows until the D tier levels, which in my opinion was a little bit late, but hey, it was for these newer players. 10 Chambers put the newer players at the forefront of their concern or priority because they knew that these would be the primary audience. Which, yes, I know that a lot of people who've been around for a while have said that they felt like the developers just threw them to the side and said, we don't care about you. But I don't think that's the case. After all, we got 4 D tier levels and 3 C tier levels that, aside from the ones, which were story-based missions, the others provided a fair amount of difficulty. They were challenging and actually were pretty enjoyable, or at least in my opinion they were. They didn't completely throw us to the side. They just knew that they had to hold on to the attention of all these newer players and make the game more accessible to them. That way the game doesn't fail and eventually go bankrupt and just can't get any more updates, which none of us want. Yes, I want the game to be hardcore and brutal, but I know if it becomes too brutal too quickly and it doesn't give a newer player any chance whatsoever to improve and actually learn the game's going to die out pretty quickly since no new players come in. Seeing how we don't have to pay for future updates, the game sort of relies on either investors, the merchandise store, and brand new players. And if brand new players refund the game and hate the game, I can tell you this, they're not going to buy merchandise. I can tell you this also, if a lot of investors see this happening over and over again, they're probably not going to invest either. We need to take the newer players into consideration and understand that we need to help them out too. That's why I help them so much by either playing with them or with my level guides, because I want them to improve. Because if more people in this game improve and get better at it, the harder the devs can make it without worrying about leaving a majority of the community in the dust. There's a difficulty curve to this game. Make it too steep and newer players have no chance to play whatsoever and they rage quit and leave the game. Make it too slow though and you make it so that the long-term players who are much better at the game get bored incredibly quickly and then they start talking bad about the rundown, which might make newer players iffy about actually getting in the first place. 10 Chambers needs to find a perfect balance, and while I don't think Rundown 6 was a perfect balance, I do think that it wasn't horrible like people put it out to be. I do think Rundown 6's difficulty was in a really good spot, and I can't wait to see future rundowns because they're going to bump up the difficulty. There's no way Rundown 7 is going to be just as easy, if not easier than Rundown 6. If we've seen before in the past with previous rundowns, difficulty is going to bump up a little bit. Maybe it'll drop down again at some point in the future, but it's going to keep going up and down a little bit. It's going to be a wave, and we need to understand that. Sometimes rundowns are going to be really hard and we're really going to love them, and other rundowns is going to be a bit easy and maybe we get bored. But not everything in life is supposed to be catered towards us. And I do wish a lot of people would be more open-minded and remember that. So I guess overall, to summarize the segment, I like Rundown 6's difficulty. The veteran in me didn't, but the person who wants other people to be able to experience the game and I want the game to grow and just flourish, understood that this was a necessity and that this was a really good thing. I've been talking about Rundown 6's difficulty for about 7 minutes now, so how about we change gears and discuss one of the other things I was introduced with Rundown 6, specifically the stamina mechanic, which, this was something that a lot of people were not very happy with, and as far as I'm aware, a lot of people still aren't all that thrilled for. For those of you who are unaware, before Rundown 6 even dropped, the stamina mechanic was leaked. It wasn't leaked by developers though, it was leaked by data miners as well as some other people in the community. And this caused a lot of problems because many people did not like the idea of a stamina mechanic being added to this game, and they were very vocal about it. I personally was a bit hesitant with it too, since I do like freedom of movement in video games, and I really didn't like the idea that I was about to be restricted, but I also realized that it was needed. There were so many issues that were tied to just having infinite stamina that they had to do something, and I figured that as long as the stamina mechanic was implemented properly and wasn't too restrictive, it would be a good change for the game. And I decided I was going to wait and see what it was like once Rundown 6 drops, do some testing with it, and then make a final decision later on. But a lot of people in the community did not share that same mindset. A lot of people were yelling at the devs, calling them idiots, saying that they had no clout to develop their game, and some people were even going as far to actually give death threats to the developers, saying that, well, nothing that I really want to repeat. Which was really saddening to see, that instead of people just giving constructive criticism or waiting to see what it would be like, they went straight for the insults and the death threats. But thankfully, it seems like things have calmed down quite a bit and people are a bit more open with it, which I have to say, I am happy with it. I don't think the stamina system is perfect. I do have some issues with it, which I'll talk about in a minute or two, but it did fix a huge issue I had with the game ever since pretty much Rundown 3. And that would be the power of kiting enemies by either circle kiting them or brainlessly long kiting them. Which, for those of you who start in Rundown 6, you probably have no clue what I'm talking about. Well, in previous rundowns, you had no stamina. You can run at max speed forever. And due to how enemies attack you and sort of how their AI works, if you can get behind them or to the side of them far enough away, they can't really hit you. So in previous rundowns, you could have a horde of 10 enemies in front of you, and you could literally run circles around them and just melee bonk them without wasting any ammunition and losing almost no health whatsoever, which made a lot of levels a joke. I played with a lot of people in the pub discords back then, and there were so many people who would see a room with about 20 enemies, and instead of trying to stealth it or just simply wake up the room and mine a door behind them, they just simply said, yeah, not worth our time, and they would run and just start smacking everything and circle kiting and losing health left and right, but still being able to complete the level, which was a huge issue. It wasn't skillful whatsoever, despite what people tell you. It was just brain dead circle kiting, and if you were the last person alive, you would just run super far away all the way back to the beginning of the level, wait for the enemies to catch up to you, and then run all the way back to your teammates and then get them up while the enemies were trying to catch up to you, which again was an issue. I did not like this whatsoever. I'm not against kiting completely. I do think repositional kiting and strategical long kiting that takes advantage of terrain and the actual tile sets themselves is perfectly fine, but brain dead long kiting and circle kiting had to go, and stamina did it. In the current moment, while it is sort of technically possible to circle kite, and while long kiting isn't completely gone, it requires a whole lot more skill, map knowledge, and just knowledge of the enemies and how they operate to actually pull off, which I think is perfect. Kiting should be a mechanic that you can only do if you are knowledgeable when it comes to this game, and it should be rewarding. Not just simply you holding down the sprint key in W and just holding down left click and smacking enemies left and right. The only real gripe I have with the stamina mechanic is I think inside combat it's a little bit too harsh. Your stamina skyrockets pretty quickly, especially if you're using a melee weapon like the sledgehammer, and it can be really annoying during levels with error alarms or just warden sequences, sort of like R6C3. In that level, you can have moments where you can run for about a minute or two before the next wave spawns in, and yet you're punished pretty much the entire time. And I understand this is sort of supposed to sort of tie into the difficulty of the level, that way you can't get from point A to point B way too quickly, but it's a little bit annoying. I feel like if enemies were alive, it makes sense. You have something coming after you, and the game doesn't want you to get too far away from them by just simply building distance and not having to worry about stamina for a good while. But when you have no enemies alive because there's another 50 seconds before the next wave spawns in, It seems a bit stupid to me. I won't lie. I'm not the biggest fan of it. I would much rather they slightly rework the stamina system. That way it's not as punishing when you're in combat. Or maybe just make it that if you're in combat but no enemies are currently alive and coming after you, then it doesn't punish you nearly as hard. That way you can actually keep progressing on with the objective and moving forward. So I hope that the devs make a few tweaks to it. I don't know if they will anytime soon, or if they just think that's perfect how it is and maybe it'll never get tweaked. But it would be nice to see just a few changes to it. That way it doesn't feel quite as restrictive once you get into combat. Speaking of brand new mechanics introduced with Rundown 6, let's talk about another one that is also somewhat controversial, and that would be the checkpoint system. From what I've seen, a lot of people either absolutely love checkpoints or they absolutely hate them, but I'm actually sort of in the middle ground. I both love and hate checkpoints for quite a few different reasons. So why do I love them? Let's go over that first. I like checkpoints because it makes the game more accessible to players. It doesn't necessarily make the game itself easier, like the level is not becoming easier because of checkpoints. It makes it easier in a sense that you don't have to redo nearly as much. Let's say you make it about halfway through the level, you get to the checkpoint, and you make a stupid mistake by accident. Like maybe you swing at a scout to try to kill with melee, and you swung a little too low, and you hit them in the shoulder, and it doesn't kill them. Scout wakes up every enemy in the room, and your team ends up wiping. It was a silly mistake, and it's not like you just didn't have the skills to get beyond that point. You definitely have the skills. It was just a time mistake. Hardcore veteran players make mistakes all the time as well. So instead of having to restart the beginning and redo the first 20 or maybe 30 minutes of the level you just did, you could just restart the checkpoint and keep moving forward with it. And I think that's good. It helps players just access more of the game, and it can help those situations where you do make that tiny little mistake. It even opens up the option to be a little bit memey with it. I'm looking at R6C1 jumping into the bottom of the room in that final area and just simply wiping and restarting the checkpoint. They're nice, I like them, but I also hate them because I feel like some people in the community try to take advantage of them and abuse them and use them incorrectly. Checkpoints should be there as a safety net. They're not there to allow you to play like an idiot or just be incredibly risky or do something stupid. They're there to help you out in case maybe you don't have as much time to focus on the level, so if you do fail, you would rather restart the checkpoint and continue on. They're there to help people who are already capable of beating that level, but maybe they just made a mistake or they just need a little bit of extra help. They should not be there though to help people who have no way of beating that level just brute force their way through, and that's what I see a lot. I see so many people do the whole beating their head against a brick wall thing using the checkpoint system, and sure, maybe it helps you get past that segment. Maybe you get to another checkpoint, or maybe you beat that level. But what happens when you move on to the next step and you realize that behind that brick wall, there's a concrete wall and you literally have no chance of breaking that one down? It's an issue. R6C1 is another great example of this. I have seen so many people struggle their way through that level, doing segment by segment, learning and adapting as they go through, which is good, but then they get to the end of the level, and then they get to that traveling scan. And during that traveling scan moment, as you may know if you watch my level guide, I recommend triple sentry because mines and seafoam just don't really help out when you get to that portion. But a fair amount of people get to that point in the level using mines and seafoam and maybe 1 or 2 sentries, and then when they get there, they struggle like crazy. And instead of thinking, okay, our strategy is flawed, we need more sentries, let's restart the level, bring in like 1 or 2 extra sentries, and quickly get back to that point since we know how to beat everything up to it, and then just be done with the level, they just beat their head against a brick wall. They use the mentality of, we're at a checkpoint, we can't return to the lobby, we're almost at the end of the level, we just gotta keep trying it, and then they spend hour after hour after hour after hour trying to beat it. I kid you not, I was watching a streamer once, they got to that final room, it took them maybe like 40 minutes to get to that final area. They get there, they keep doing checkpoints over and over, and I'm just watching in the background while I'm editing a video, and I noticed that they were in that moment reusing that checkpoint over and over again for 5 hours straight instead of just simply restarting. I even gave them advice and told them, hey, having multiple sentries really helps out. Maybe it's best to return back to the lobby and then just go on with a new loadout. But they just said, no, we're not going to do it. We got this. We're at the end. We just need better RNG. And they keep doing it over and over. And that's the thing I really hate about checkpoints. The fact that in some situations, people can use them to just beat their head against a brick wall. I understand story-based missions are supposed to have more because it's more meant to, about the story and the the lore elements that are given to you rather than a challenge, so they have a few more. That's understandable. But there needs to be a good balance. R6D1, for example, has way too many checkpoints in it, in my opinion. I get it, it's supposed to be the final story-based mission of the rundown. The developers really wanted people to see it and see the epic boss fight at the end of the level, but you easily could have taken 1 or 2 of them out of that level and it still would have been fine. If you put way too many in, it just enables people to beat their head against a brick wall. And yes, this issue is more so with players and not necessarily checkpoints themselves, but there's a way to circumnavigate this. There is a way to put checkpoints in these levels and make it so that people who have the skills but maybe just need a little bit of extra help can still make it through with the use of checkpoints, but people who do not have the skills and are not going to be capable of beating that level can't make it to the checkpoint in the first place to take advantage of it and abuse it. Make it so that these checkpoints don't appear nearly as early. That way, when people go in, they actually have to learn about the level, adapt and improve their strategy and get better at the game. And then once they have the skills to actually be able to beat said level, then they can make it to the checkpoint. And that way they can start using it a bit more instead of just abusing the heck out of it and not improving whatsoever. I've mentioned story-based missions a few times already in this video, but people did ask me for what my opinions and thoughts were on them, so let's talk a little bit more in depth about them. From what I've seen, a lot of people either really like story-based missions or they really hate them. Typically, the people who hate them just don't really like lore that much in this game. They don't care about whatsoever. They just play the game for the challenge and to just see what the next level has in store for them. So they really don't care because these are sort of just easier levels that you have to stop all the time at doors because you have somebody yakking your ear off. At least that's how they view it. But to people like me and others who love lore, we view these as gold mines of information. We get so many email logs and audio logs in the terminals, we get the audio logs on the doors and stuff, and it's really cool because to us, we go from just simply playing the game to living the game, experiencing it, and just seeing what the game has in store for us, which is really awesome to see. This is something I've enjoyed ever since Rundown 1, because even though there wasn't really any lore in Rundown 1 or 2, no audio or email logs or stuff for the most part, there was still some lore. In Rundown 1, the whole purpose of what we were doing was to make our way through the complex and escape the area we're currently at. That way we can make it to Rundown 2 where we had to go collect something. At least I believe that's the story for Rundown 1. I'll be honest, I'm a little bit shaky with that. But in Rundown 2, the whole purpose is to make our way through the complex all the way to the bottom where the neonate was that we're going to need for later. We were going through activating reactors, that way there was power in some of the lower levels, distracting enemies in some areas, that way there weren't nearly as many in some of the later levels, so we had an easier time going through it. There was so much stuff, and we could see the levels tying into each other as long as we read the level description and just paid a little bit of attention to it. And then at the end of Rundown 2, we get the neonate, escape with it, and then Rundown 3, we're doing things like resuscitating it, depressurizing it to open it up, getting some DNA that we can tie in with it or some other things, and at the end, we're putting it into the neuroframe network, and then we escape afterwards because our job has been completed. It was really cool to see all that, to get an idea of what I'm doing in the rundown, and then having the curiosity as to how will this tie into the next rundown? What am I going to do now? But then Rundown 4 and 5 sort of stopped doing that because there were a lot of other things that took higher priority, so the whole levels tying into each other you didn't really see for the most part. At least, especially not in Rundown 4. In Rundown 5 you saw a little bit, but not nearly as much as you did with 1, 2, and 3. But then in Rundown 6, it came back. We start off in A1 collecting the matter wave projector because we were going to need it. In B1, we use the matter wave projector to teleport into Alpha 1 or whatever it was. That way we can use a terminal to download the coordinates of the data cubes that we needed, and then once we know where they are, we go back, we go into R6C1, we collect those data cubes, and then we go into D1 with the data cubes and the matter wave, and we use it. That way we can teleport out to Alpha 2, or whatever that one was called, and then use the terminal out there to download the genome database, which seemed to have been really the main purpose of base Rundown 6. And then the extension, we also had more stuff we were doing that was also sort of story-based, but this was more so about Schaefer, which was really cool to see. I love being able to picture the story of a rundown and piece stuff together and then wonder, what am I doing in the next rundown? What is the purpose? Like, why did I have to get this genome database in R6? How is this going to tie into the story-based missions in Rundown 7? Or will it? Will maybe Rundown 7 tell a little bit of a different story, and then that will tie in with R6 at a later point, maybe in Rundown 8? You never know. And it's really cool for somebody like me who loves lore to be able to look at. The only real issue I guess I have with story-based missions is not the fact that they're easier. I like that because I want more people to be able to experience the story, but more so I fear that sometimes we might get too much information with them. I love being able to look through levels and have to find these hidden email and audio logs and piece stuff together myself, theory craft stuff, and sort of just talk with other people about what we think is going on and try to figure out what the bigger picture is. So I'm really hoping that in Rundown 7, 8, and future rundowns, that the story-based missions are like Rundown 6, where they give us a fair amount of information and they tell a story, but that story is just a small part of the greater picture. So we're still clueless when it comes to a lot of things. We don't really understand everything that's going on. That way, if we really want a lot of that juicy information, we have to go into the levels and we have to look for them and we have to piece it all together, because that makes the lore of GTFO so much more enjoyable for me and a lot of other people. Not having it spoon-fed to us, but rather giving some of it to us directly and then forcing us to get the rest of it. That way we can piece it all together. And that's where I think I'll end off this review. I can already hear some of you saying, but Scalar, you haven't talked about your hopes for Rundown 7 yet. You always talk about your hopes for the next rundown whenever you do one of these review videos. Why aren't you doing it this time? Oh, simply put, it's because I just really can't, or at least I guess it's more so I just don't want to. As some of you may be aware, I've already playtested a fair amount of the Rundown 7 levels with the other bug hunters, and because of that, I can't genuinely say what I hope to see in Rundown 7, because I've seen it, I know what to expect. And while I can be a technical Terry and talk about things that I was hoping to see before I actually stepped foot into Rundown 7, I feel like at that point I'm just treading over a very thin line. I'm trying to walk down a very slippery slope where one mistake and I can get in a lot of trouble. I don't want the developers to think that I'm trying to leak stuff to you guys by talking about things that might be or might not actually be in Rundown 7. Because just like I have before in the past, I have predicted a few things correctly about Rundown 7. These are things I have not said to anybody, by the way, so don't bother trying to go through your memory banks to remember what it was I said I hope to see, because this is stuff I kept to myself. But even then, I just don't want to talk about it because I know that there are people out there who can tell if a person is lying or not just due to the tone of their voice, and I'm a bad liar, so I don't want to risk any of that whatsoever. I want to stay on the good side of the developers, and I want to stay true to you guys. I think it's a lot more fun to experience this stuff firsthand rather than already know it's about to happen. You just don't know exactly when it's going to happen. So I'm not going to say anything in regards to what I'm hoping to see in Rundown 7. In general, in the future, yeah, there's a lot of stuff I'm hoping to see. Stuff like better difficulty scaling for rundowns, more unique enemies that change up the way we have to play the game, a brand new tool maybe, some weapons that are really unique and change up the way you use them, some better optimization, that way people with lower end PCs can actually play this game above 20 or 30 FPS. There's a lot of stuff. So many things I've stated ever since like Rundown 2, 3, or 4 that I've been hoping to see for a while, and that all stays true. Some of that might be coming true in Rundown 7, some of it might not be. You're not going to know until you play it yourself when it releases. Speaking of the release of Rundown 7, that's not too far away from us, so this will probably be the final main video I do before then. I did have another guide video planned out for releasement before Rundown 7, but due to some reasons I'm not going to specify, I've decided that I'm going to wait until shortly after Rundown 7's release to make it. So the only things you will see between here and Rundown 7's release are just simply going to be some short videos, since I do have a little bit of footage still left that I can use, although I don't know how much. So you might get 1, 2, maybe even 3. Not 100% sure though, we'll just sort of have to see. That's about everything. At this point, I think I'm just going to ramble on if I try to find anything else to say, so thank you everyone for tuning into this video. I talked about a fair amount of stuff I did and did not like in regards to Rundown 6 in this video, but there's definitely a lot more I could have talked about. So if you have any questions or you want to hear my thoughts about some other subjects, please do let me know down in the comment section. I'm more than willing to have a conversation with anybody down there as long as things can remain civil. But until next time, keep on being awesome. Remember that disagreements don't always have to turn into arguments. Agreeing to disagree is always a very valid answer after all. And I'll see you all in the next video.